This is a real industry with real professional rigor and standards. And if you don't see that, maybe you're just talking to the wrong people.
So talk is cheap. You need to learn to walk the talk when it comes to purpose and impact. And to truly differentiate and grow with confidence, you can't just say you're purpose-driven. You need to learn how to design and measure and track with impact. And that is where Sienna Jackson comes in. For too long, entrepreneurs and business owners have been told they have to choose between profit and purpose. If you're tired of burning out, done chasing someone else's version of success, and ready to grow with more purpose, prosperity, and peace of mind, you're in the right place. Because every business has the potential to do good and do well. I'm Chase Friedman, and this is In Pursuit of Purpose, where strategy meets soul. Sienna is a strategist and cultural leader dedicated to building impact systems that fuel long-term growth and systemic change. As the founder and CEO of Zoran Creative Strategy, she guides mission-driven organizations at the intersection of cause, culture, and capital, specializing in impact measurement, partnerships, and storytelling, driving actual tangible results. She's a former Hollywood executive who worked on award-winning soundtracks with artists like Pharrell and U2. Yes, she's a Renaissance woman, just getting started. Sienna now channels her expertise into social impact with CSR and ESG strategy, with roles on the board of Social Value International, Social Value US. She's bringing creative and strategic clarity to leaders who are navigating today's shifting marketplace. In this episode, we're going to unpack why purpose is not fluff, it is fuel. And we're going to learn how to walk the talk to drive measurable impact in our business, our community, and the world. Sienna, amazing to have you today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Chase.
I was prepping this episode and trying to determine where in the ether of all of your experiences, as I like to call you a Renaissance woman, where we dive in and we begin. But I should just kind of share with everybody who's listening or watching, you are very much a friend, a mentor, sort of a shining light in what I think this show is meant to be all about. And it's really having honest and real and raw conversations with people that are walking the talk. Right? Not just for yourself, but holding others accountable, holding businesses and brands accountable, and encouraging them and nurturing them how to put some of this purpose and intention into practice through design, through strategy, through measurement. So I want to roll back to the earlier days, even though you're, so much ahead of you. You have had so many different phases and seasons, I think, in your career already. Probably more than people would have in a lifetime. You started in entertainment and storytelling and media. And then now have gone on to consulting with everyone from the UN to major global Fortune 100, 500 organizations. Talk to me about how story was that first entry point for you in helping you identify, I think, the way that you can make an impact in the world.
I think, well, first of all, Chase, I consider you a friend and a peer because this is such the impact community and like impact practitioner community in LA is, quite small. And it's only like a few of us who are doing this sort of work. And within that bubble, there is like a certain segment of like ex-entertainment industry folks that have pivoted into impact. And you're one of those folks. There's only a handful of people that I know with sort of that background and that perspective. But I think it makes us stronger at what we do. One of the things that I noticed immediately coming out of the gate when I founded Zoran Creative Strategy in 2020 was that a lot of nonprofits, a lot of impact-driven brands and businesses and startups and even like major funds, narrative is like a weak piece, right? That people don't necessarily know how to tell a story, or they don't know how to craft a narrative that inspires action, right? They don't know how to communicate their impact to their internal stakeholders, how to get buy-in. They don't know how to communicate to external partners. And that sort of skill gap has a really profound negative impact on organizations that are just focused on doing the work. And I think what I noticed immediately when I made my transition into impact work is that my background in music for film and television actually was a differentiator for me in this new space. It's something that most people that I work with now in my current career, they don't have that context. They don't have that background. So I like to bring what I have from the entertainment industry into the work that I do now. So, I think that kind of goes to show that whatever you do in your career, if you make a pivot, everything you've done up to a certain point can feed and serve as a foundation for what you do in the future. Like, you don't have to throw out the baby with the bathwater when you make a career change.
It's so funny you say that. We've already echoed this a few times on this show with just the few guests that we've already had so far. We're so early, and each entrepreneur coming from very different backgrounds has echoed the same sentiment, right? Sometimes as entrepreneurs, as trailblazers, walking our own path, sometimes we have our own blind spots, but if we reflect on it, each of those successive experiences, no matter the industry or discipline, really helps prepare us for that next step, right? In this case, as you said, storytelling is such a critical component to the work that you're doing now, right? And I think a bit of a differentiator for you in the space, I would imagine. Hollywood and media and entertainment, great at telling stories, great at sometimes weaving the narrative, but how are we holding these sorts of companies accountable to walking the talk, right? How are we making it more than just the promise of a better tomorrow, doing good for our constituents and stakeholders and, creating shared value? How is your role now equipped to hold these folks accountable and set them up for success in true sort of long-term impact strategy?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of have to take a couple steps back, because right now, when you talk about just the state of, corporate social responsibility and philanthropy, broadly in the US context, we're going through a major upheaval. The current administration is very antagonistic to a lot of the regulatory schemas that have been, developing in the last several years that, for instance, around ESG or DEI, or how we quantify impact or, investments. There's been a lot of pullback of federal funding for a lot of activities that you see even in the private sector. Like, I don't think people fully understood until, at this point in the year, like we're at the end of September 2025, as we have this conversation, so much has happened. I don't think people fully realize the role that the federal government plays in a lot of private sector activity in the investor impact environment from like an impact investor standpoint. And just like the regulatory schemas that help promote and encourage private sector organizations and companies to invest in certain ways and in their operations. So you've seen some companies kind of pull back on their commitments from like a corporate social responsibility or philanthropy side. Others have leaned in. Costco is an immediate example that comes to mind, and a few other like major firms. Mm-hmm. And then you're also seeing from a global perspective, a lot of, private equity, private philanthropies, and, other companies and other regulatory schemes now taking more, a more preeminent place in that global impact landscape. So especially from like the EU with their ESG regulations and their new standards for reporting for companies. So there's this big power shift that is happening. From the practitioner standpoint, the need for impact, right? For companies to demonstrate their corporate stewardship, to demonstrate the social value that they create through their operations. You need that more than ever, because now we're dealing in an environment of increasing skepticism, where you have to really deliver tangible proofs to your investors, your board of directors, your customers, like all of your CIPs and your stakeholders, that you are actually, walking the walk and not just giving empty platitudes, because companies that were giving platitudes and then pulled back have been punished. Yeah. A good example is Target. I think they wiped off like $1 billion of value off of their books because of their blunders. And they have now there's new leadership coming in that has to now walk all of that back. So that it's a lot of chaos in the market right now.
So we talk, I like to use the phrase, purpose isn't fluff, it's fuel, mm-hmm. right? And I do believe, and there, as I'm sure plenty of it, there's so much data and research out there that proves that this does impact the bottom line in a variety of different ways, mm-hmm. whether it's margin and pricing power or market share or employee recruitment and retention, reducing churn and turnover, right? So we do see the bottom line aspects of it. And yet, like you said, when the going gets tough for some companies and they just jump ship because it's no longer convenient for them. You mentioned Target, right? Having a big drawdown on their valuation. Whereas you have Costco that is standing up for, their values and saying, no, not only do we believe in our DEI program, we believe it actually makes us a stronger and better business, right? So for the companies that are maybe trying to find their way, but don't know how to measure that, right? The intention is there, the promise is there, but we aren't quite sure how we know if we're doing good, if it's impacting community, if it's impacting the bottom line. That's, I think, some of the work that you're leading, right? With Zoran, creative strategy. Talk to us about your role and how you are helping kind of show them the way, right? And creating design and strategy and measurement to help them stay the course.
It really depends on the type of client. So I'll give like a tangible example. So one of my ongoing clients is the Ethiopian Diaspora Trust Fund. They are, like what the name suggests, it is a fund that was created by and for members of the Ethiopian diaspora to raise money from that global direct diaspora and then invest those monies back into Ethiopia. So digging wells, building schools and orphanages, a lot of sort of NGO type project work. That's what they were focused on when I first started consulting with them in fall of 2023 at this point. They've since pivoted a lot of their investment strategy into funding startups. So this January, this year, we kicked off the inaugural Great Rift Valley Innovation Summit. So it was a 2-day summit in Addis Ababa, the capital of Ethiopia. We partnered with the United Nations to do an accelerator program, which is still ongoing. And we funded 18 startups in the country in the sectors of agriculture, healthcare, and education. The grand prize winner, Lifeline Addis, received $150,000, and it's all non-dilutive. So we are, putting money into private sector startups in the country, that are hiring Ethiopian, by Ethiopians, for Ethiopians, making impacts in these 3 major sectors that have so much weight and consequence on the lives of people in that country. That didn't come out of nowhere. What that really big, ambitious project, like this huge it was hundreds of thousands of dollars of investment. What it started was, hey, we need to look at your marketing and operations. We need to pop the hood and see how this very lean organization is functioning day to day, and how do we integrate impact into your everyday operations. So it's funny how most of my consulting work, there will be big projects. Like I worked on the 2020 presidential election, for instance. But even on big, initiatives, whether it's a global event or if it's a nationwide campaign or something of that nature, most of my day-to-day with those same clients is, okay, who do you actually want to help? What is the vision? If you could just in a sentence tell me, hey, if everything goes right, what sort of difference are you making in the world? Even just how to articulate that goal. And then once we have that goal articulated, okay, let's work our way backwards from that horizon and set benchmarks for how we progress to that point. Let's also identify, hey, if this is your ambitious goal, what can you do that's in your immediate purview where you can make the changes or effectuate the impacts that will lead to this result? And how do you build in both a metrics framework that can quantify those operations? How do you create a theory of change on top of that? How do you build a logic model that connects your actions and activities to these tangible outcomes?
I mean, what you've just kind of shared with us, is eye-opening, because I think it can be daunting for a lot of people to understand exactly the pathway to get there, right? Who we're trying to serve, what is the impact we're trying to make in the world? And as you said, reverse engineering. I think you just articulated in a broad sense, how do you move from purpose statement, the intention, the talk, into impact systems, right? True integration in the organization. That's not just, again, what's the end game, KPI, dashboard, OKR, but you just said this is not a set it and forget it process. This works for those companies that have the time, the bandwidth, the resources to invest in it, right?
Yes.
If a company, because I want to ground this at sort of an approachable level, because I think for a lot of small, medium-sized business owners, right, this can be daunting. This
Yeah.
can be to the point where it's almost a hope gap. Like, well, I want to get there, but I can't even conceive of how I would be able to do that for my small business, right?
Yeah.
So if we're bringing it down to earth, and let's say a company doesn't have a Sienna, which everyone should, and one day you'll create your GPT and everyone will have a version of you. That's great. Until that time comes, right? What are some practical, low-touch steps that a smaller business can take to create that, again, that bridge between intention and purpose statement and impact strategy, something that is sustainable, something they can do within reasonable amount of time and resources. And at the end of the day, feel good about the results and the data they've gathered to, again, reaffirm and double down on that intention.
A lot of my clients actually are small. They're I've got a couple of like startups and like very small enterprises that are just getting off the ground. And usually what I'll do with them is we'll work out what and I'm sure you've talked about it before with other guests on the podcast, like what their theory of change is, right? What is the basic logic model of, hey, we're company A. I'll give a real example of a real client. So I had a very short-term consulting engagement with a startup, very early going, but they're building a tool that is essentially Rate My Professor, but for judges. So for folks navigating the court system who are, justice impacted, it's in a particular state. So it's in one state, you're a justice impacted person. The courts are intimidating. You don't really understand how to navigate as a civilian, how to navigate the court system. So this platform educates you on your rights. It educates you on how to navigate if you're called to court for some reason, if you're a ticket or something, or you're otherwise justice impacted, how to navigate and how to advocate for yourself if you don't have resources, right? So it includes trainings and workshops and educational modules, and then also this platform that is, again, Rate My Professor, but for judges. So if you're being seen by a judge who has a history of making very, very biased decisions, you're kind of going in armed with that knowledge. So very, very small startup. It was only like 2 people involved, but I helped them figure out, okay, first of all, who are your stakeholders that you're trying to get to? What are the gaps between you and the people that you're trying to reach? What is your theory of change that is beyond just your mission, vision, and values? What are the actual operations of your business that are connecting to these stakeholders, that are connecting to these impacts that you are endeavoring to make? What are your activities? What are the resources that go into executing and operationalizing your business? And then what is the predicted outcome based on those investments, right? And just like really simple math, simple ratios, things that you could just do in Excel and update, and build into sort of your business plan. So like, hey, here's your template, like impact-oriented business plan that connects your business operations to your impacts outcomes. Here's your theory of change. Hey, here's also like your UNSDG alignments. So if you need more metrics down the line, you can say, hey, we're actually really aligned with this goal, that goal, that goal. So just like a toolkit, basically, to help them articulate to funders, to other partners, hey, here's where we situate in the landscape of criminal justice reform in this state. Here's what we are doing that's unique from like other people in this ecosystem. And here's why we are a smart investment, why you should fund us, because here's our operations, here's our expected impacts, and then here's our plan to implement. Right? Here's our implementation plan for like fiscal year 2026. So really like simple stuff, but those are the things that an impact investor or fund or that's looking for implementing partners wants to see, right? They want to know that you have kind of all your ducks in a row. You may not have staff yet. You may not have like launched your program, but here's your actual roadmap for getting it done and then monitoring your progress as you go through this implementation plan. So that's the sort of stuff that I'll do for like smaller clients.
what you've described, right, is that this can also be a very powerful positioning mechanism as for the brand or for the business, right?
Absolutely.
And I talk about purpose positioning, how leaning into that purpose and that vision of impact can be your greatest positioning power in a very crowded marketplace, right? When there's a lot of lookalike brands and services and products and sort of this competitive commoditization, what are you doing to stand out from the pack, right? And I don't mean competing on price or features and widgets and some of these other
It's about
elements, right?
efficacy. Like that's the thing that really,
Sure.
and we've talked about this.
Yeah.
A lot of impacts consulting, if you're not careful, is just empty marketing shtick, and that's
Mm-hmm.
not good enough, especially in this current climate. People
Yep.
want to see proof. They
Yep.
want validation. They
Yep.
want to know the efficacy of what you're doing, or else you're just wasting time and money. Right? It can't just be empty marketing shtick. You have to be able to demonstrate that materiality of, hey, this is our business, this is our mission, this is what we do, here's how we do it, and here's why we know it works. And one thing that I find when I talk to some people as a consultant, I'll talk to folks and I'll be like, oh, what are you doing? What is your business? What are you about? And they'll tell me what they're about. And I'm like, okay, so your stakeholders are X group. And they'll be like, yeah. And I'm like, okay, when was the last time you spoke to those people? Like, who in that community are you speaking to? and so you need to have that real connectivity, because otherwise you're just kind of floating around in this very crowded space.
Well, we've seen the blowback for a lot of brands for just simply doing this empty vapid exercise, this box checking exercise, this greenwashing, this purpose washing, right? And I think everyone can agree, consumers, stakeholders are far too savvy for you to try to pull kind of a veil over their faces, right? That they're going to see right through it. They're going to see right through and be able to kind of call BS on the brands that are simply just jumping onto a cause because it is of note and of trend and of timeliness, right? For the convenience sake, and then jumping off once it's not aligned or not kind of the moment. So I think you got to be very careful. You've seen Pepsi, you've seen Budweiser, you've seen a lot of different brands, right? Do the whole flex when it was never really part of their sort of ethos. And I think that's the other thing too, is when a lot of clients and business owners and entrepreneurs come to me as well, and when I ask them this question around what is that purpose, what is that impact beyond the bottom line you want to have in the world, I think there's this anxiety that they feel when they have to answer, like it has to be this world-saving initiative, right? That's not the case. It doesn't mean you're solving climate change or social injustice. I mean, you're doing a lot of those things, but not every entrepreneur has to have this big, grandiose, almost unattainable purpose and vision, because a lot of times you're never going to get there. And B, it might not even be aligned with what you truly want out of your life and your business. You're just doing it to sort of, position or sort of value posture to who you're trying to attract.
Yeah.
So I think it's getting honest and real with what it is you are passionate about and aligns with your ethos and your mantra and your business, but also what is achievable and where you can have a true tangible impact in the world and stay in that course. But I hear you. We've seen this sort of greenwashing kind of become a little bit rampant. And that's why, again, I think the theme of this conversation is how to walk the talk, right? And you've just outlined quite a few ways in which businesses can do that.
There's like a huge environment of global bodies now that put forward the best practices and the frameworks and standards by which professionals in my industry do our work. So social value, like SVI, for instance, has a lot of the trainings and certifications for social value practitioners or impact practitioners. We do trainings for SRY analysis. If you want to know how to do the accounting for proving social good, you can take those trainings and certifications now. They're administered online and they're pretty easy. Like I'm going through my SV level 1 practitioner. I have to do my test. It's like an online thing. So there are actual standards for our business. And there's also global bodies that are working to, create interoperable standards. So for instance, SVI is a partner with GIN, which is the Global Impact Investing Network, that represents about 15,000 organizations that contribute to the metrics frameworks for like across various industries and sectors like healthcare and agriculture
Mm-hmm.
and all of these different things. It's backed by the WHO, a lot of the different major foundations like Rockefeller, a lot of NGOs. It's the same ecosystem that helped give rise to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Like it is a huge landscape of nonprofits, funds, NGOs, government partners that are doing this work of how we quantify impact and how do we set metrics and goals and how do we measure our progress as a global society towards good.
What would you say to the naysayers and the non-believers or the eye rollers out there that whether they're listening to this conversation or they've heard of this before that aren't quite, how do we put this? Drinking our Kool-Aid. I mean, everyone's drinking their own version of Kool-Aid. What would you say to the non-believers out there that of why this is no longer just a nicety, but a necessity for not only surviving, but thriving as a brand and a business in this next generation?
Well, yeah, because it's just the world that we live in is not separate and intangible to the business environment. The business environment is the world. And when you've got very, very significant problems and challenges that we as human beings are facing collectively, your business is not operating in a vacuum where it's untouched by these negative externalities, right? Like you're part of everything, whether you accept it or not. And all of the challenges that we face are man-made problems, whether you talk about like social issues or economic issues or environmental issues. These are all man-made problems, which means that there's a man-made solution or solutions for all of these problems that we're dealing with that impact, not just the company's bottom line, but the community where they operate, their workforce, their stakeholders, these things are not truly separate from each other.
They're not mutually exclusive, right?
No. And so it's naive to think that the state of the world is not relevant to your ability to operate. Like so
you better wake up and give a shit is basically what we're saying.
You have to, because I tell people all the time nowadays, it's like you either deal with it or it will deal with you. And as an entrepreneur myself, I have to deal with the reality or the exigencies of our moment, or else I'm not actually being responsive to the market. It's not some magical other world that exists separately from this one. And if everything's on fire, that impacts my business. It's just like basic logic, whether it's on fire literally or figuratively. And I know a lot of people in like insurance and the financial services industry that, for instance, very impacted by the fires, right? And it changed their business. Like there's even with the current skepticism around DEI, a lot of companies are continuing their investments because they know they have risks that they need to control from like employment litigation and different regulatory schema. And, it costs money to replace people. Like my new startup that's still in kind of dev mode focuses on risk management and employment litigation for large enterprises, right? Around HR compliance automation, all these different things. It's DEI, but from the perspective of, hey, are you even insurable? Or are you like so risky in your human capital management strategy that you're going to be paying extra for like EPLI insurance, and you're going to pay like 25% premium on your EPLI? That is how you take lofty ideas and translate them into like everyday business concerns. If you can take lofty problems and translate them into like, hey, what does this atomize into in terms of everyday business concerns and how do we address those? That's how you get companies that are skeptical to still get involved in the work because they recognize the value of addressing those specific problems.
I think it's, for regardless of what your belief system is, I think just good common business sense, right, is you need to deal with this now before it deals with you later.
Absolutely.
Right? Whether you want to embrace the term, the concepts and terms of DEI and ESG and all these sorts of things, the global issues that are surrounding that are still there and not going away, right?
Exactly.
Doesn't matter what we label it of a time, right? And I'm sure the vernacular is going to continue to iterate and change.
Yeah, now I think the new umbrella term is sustainability for all of these
Sure.
things, but it's just the same.
And
It's
we
the
even
same
get
stuff.
some eye rolls around sustainability too. But at the end of the day, it's like, do you want to not only just kind of survive, but thrive as a business? And you just said they're not mutually exclusive from the society we live in, the world we live in, the communities that, that nurture and educate and train the future employees for our companies, of tomorrow. Mm-hmm. So I think looking at creating shared value, triple bottom line, it's terms that we use. And yet, whether you use them in your vernacular or not, these are things that in this interconnected world, I think you'd be neglecting it if you sort of tune that out and thought, I'm just going to focus on my business and what we do and the singular bottom line. And I think we've seen what happens with that. So going back to silver lining positive, because I think I want this to be very much an inspiration for people that are either just starting out or on their journey or stuck or struggling. Mm-hmm. We all need that shining light of someone who's doing it well. And you are certainly that person that is leading the charge, sort of that fearless leader. Who is one brand or leader in the space that you admire for walking the talk when it comes to impact, systems, and measurement?
I don't know if there's like a brand. That's hard to say. Here's how I look at it. Because I think this work is very isolating. It can be, mm-hmm. and it can be very, there's a lot of emotional compartmentalization you have to do, especially like for me, I have a lot of like face time with stakeholders. Like, mm-hmm. I talk to people who are like suffering the outcomes, the negative outcomes of when things go wrong. What I remind myself is that there is this landscape when you're talking about any given problem, when you're talking about any given issue that might be close to your heart, there are more people who care and are doing real tangible work to address these problems than you can see. There's not exactly like one fearless leader or like one guru. Most of the people who are doing the best work in our industry, in our space, are completely anonymous. They are not doing podcast interviews. They are not like out there. They are just quietly every day getting up and doing the work. So most of the people that I respect the most in this space are just quietly plugging away at their jobs.
Heroes. Yeah.
And most of the people that I encounter that I find are the most impactful are those folks. Which, when I talk to folks who want to get into this space, I say, it's that Mr. Rogers quote of like, look to the helpers, right? In any situation, if you feel overwhelmed by the injustices of the world, or like things are not happening fast enough, or these problems are so big, why isn't anyone doing anything? Where's our one fearless leader who we rally around? That I caution people against that desire, because that kind of offloads the responsibility of doing what you can do to that one, entity or leader that you want to follow. That's not actually how change happens. Change happens because a lot of people from their own purview are doing what they can within the boundaries of what they're able to do. It is collective. It is additive. It is slow. It's very much a coalition. There's not like one person who's going to wave a magic wand and do it all. I think that's a very dangerous notion. It's really about the small everyday work of everyday people working together and quietly doing what they know is right and following their values, whether they are rewarded or not.
Yeah.
And whether their values are tested or not, they stick to it. And some of the best impacts that I've seen have been accomplished by people like that.
Yeah. These compounding sort of micro commitments and micro actions. No, that's great. I love that you turned that question on its head, because it is still a very much an important answer. It's not looking for that sort of that one fearless leader that is, you're right, is going to kind of give us almost the mindset to kind of shirk responsibility, but maybe who we can reach out to, our fellow peers in our ether, in our community, to kind of get something done that maybe to us seems a little bit kind of insurmountable or daunting.
Absolutely.
I want to wrap up with a couple quick little rapid fire questions for you. These are like one word, one line, one sentence kind of reactions.
Ooh, that's hard for me. I like to go. I'll just go and go.
That's why I prefaced it. And that's why we have a really great, that's why we have a good editor that's going to edit you regardless. What is one myth about impact that you want to bury for good, that you wish people would simply just erase from their biases or consciousness?
That it's just wishy-washy. Like this is a real industry with real professional rigor and standards. And if you don't see that, maybe you're just talking to the wrong people.
Lovely. What is one? I mean, I'm impressed. That's a soundbite right there. That might just go at the beginning of the episode. What is one measurable practice, tangible practice that every company, any company, can start right now?
Stakeholder check-ins. Talk to your employees, talk to your shareholders, talk to your investors, talk to your customers, talk to everybody that you deal with in your space so that you actually know what's going on, or else you're going to get bit in the butt and surprised.
Amen. Inside out. It's your most potent ambassadors and feedback loop, our own internal stakeholders. And yet companies continue to just seek outside
kind of concepts. Billions of dollars. It's crazy how much it costs.
These management consulting firms are just raking it in. Wrapping up to the end in one sentence, what do you believe is your purpose?
I want to help the helpers. I want to arm the people that I work with the tools and the knowledge and the know-how and the connections that they need to succeed in what they're doing. And I know that in the 5 years that I've been doing this, I've impacted tens of thousands of lives because I've helped the right people to do their work.
Amen.
Yeah.
I see you doing it every day. Sienna, thank you so much for joining. I know you've got so many new initiatives on your plate. Where can people tuning in that have been inspired by you and your message find you, connect with you, follow your work?
LinkedIn. I'm really easy. I don't do social media. LinkedIn is all I got.
And that's how we met, by the way.
That is how we met. Oh my God. We
have a LinkedIn meet cute, which I wouldn't recommend for everybody, but one of those rare occurrences where it's created a beautiful and lasting friendship.
That's crazy. I forgot that's how it started.
Yeah, man. It's weird. I mean, I met my wife on a dating app, so maybe I'm just destined to like virtual meets, or I'm just sort of a misanthrope. Well, thank you so much for being, and thank you for being here. And then the last thing I'll ask you is, where is a great destination or resource, and I'm sure it exists everywhere, where people can continue to learn more about what they can do for their businesses and their communities?
Okay. I would say first, check out Social Value International's website, so that you can go to their resources tab and get a lot of free available resources for social return on investment analysis, impact measurement, best practice. You learn a little bit more about our space. So SVI's official website. Also, the Impact Management Project has and it's the Impact Management Platform, I believe is what it's called. And it gives you like an ecosystem map of who's in this space and doing really good work. I will put together a list of links so that you can share it with your audience of places I would recommend you to go if you want to learn more about how I do what I do. I'm going to put together a syllabus.
A gift. You've given us a gift. You've given me a gift. I'm like writing notes right here as well that I need to kind of go check out. So when you do that, we will put that in the show notes for anyone listening can go take a look at that, go deeper, go dive, and connect with Sienna. Once again, thank you for being here, being you, and helping the helpers everywhere you can.
Thank you, Chase. Thank you so much for having me.
I appreciate you tuning in today. I hope this brought you a bit of confidence, clarity, and conviction on your business journey. If something here resonated, do me a favor, leave a quick review or share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. It goes a long way in helping more people find the show and start their own journey. And as always, you'll find all the resources and ways to connect with me in the show notes. Now, go take that next step in building the business you've been dreaming of. Wishing you continued purpose, prosperity, and peace of mind.